What connects French architect Paul Gourdet with the historical center of Almaty? Why is the Jarkent Mosque the single surviving work of Chinese architect Han Pike? Where is Valikhanov's manor house Sirimbiet located? Forgotten names and little-known facts, recent history and national color, all this is in the Grand Buildings program. Today in our program, he traveled the path from hut to the House of Scientists. He showed Almaty residents what elite housing was before the very appearance of this idea. He built the most famous square in Kazakhstan. Architect, designer, artist, Almas Ordabayev. It was the end of the 70s of the last century. Central Committee's head of Kazakhstan's Communist Party, member of Political Bureau, Dinmuhamed Kunayev, is on a working trip to the capital of the Soviet Ukraine. The Ukrainians wanted to impress the honored guest and selected a program for his visit for a long time. At that moment, one of the party leaders remembered that Kunayev was a president of the Academy of Sciences of Kazakh Soviet Socialist Republic before his political career. Then it was decided to show the head of Sister Republic one of the main sites of Kiev, the House of Scientists. The House of Scientists in Ukraine was the building of the 18th century. It was also guarded by the state. It was a two-story building, but there was everything necessary for the House of Scientists. It had a dining room, its buildings for clubs, for all sorts of problematic issues. Dimash Akhmetovich liked this. He returns to Alma-Ata and says, "What is it? We have everything. We have scientists, and why there is nothing for the organization of leisure time and recreation. Come on, think." The project development of the House of Scientists was assigned to a man who had already proved himself at that moment as one of the best architects of Alma-Ata. It was Almas Ordabayev. Therefore, an object appeared on the map of Soviet Kazakhstan's capital, with which the names of prominent scientists of the Republic were connected. Moreover, his founder still considers the building one of his best creations. In addition to architecture, Almas Ordabayev was seriously fascinated with painting at that time and played the cello. He still paints pictures, but the music was finished because of craving for architecture. One of his projects, a model of a medieval city with artillery cannons exploding right in the hands of the architect.
Сам вот этот вот металл, из которого была сделана вот эта вот
The metal itself, from which the small cannon was made, and the bottom formed into the most important finger of the cellist. The cellists are playing on the haft, right here to the bone, while the question of final examination and further career was simply resolved.
Ну и вопрос выпускного экзамена и дальнейшей карьеры был просто-напросто снят.
Almas Ordabayev spent his childhood in post-war Alma-Ata. In those years, due to numerous evacuations, the capital of Soviet Kazakhstan turned into a major industrial, cultural, and scientific center of the whole Union. There was a real building boom in the city. Massive buildings grew along the central streets, which now are customarily attributed to Stalin Empire. Somewhere in the 7th and 8th form, it was very interesting and fascinating for me to watch how the first large post-war interesting buildings were constructed. In particular, that old government house, how cornices of different options were placed there in order to choose which one was better, how they put capitals on columns. This is the place where KB2U is located now. Moreover, in those years, being a senior schoolboy, I took these famous classic books for all architects in the public library, the works of Alberti, Vignola, all these famous books. Therefore, the dream was born, the dream turned into a goal. The goal was achieved soon. The architecture of Ordabayev changed the appearance of Alma-Ata. He became the author of large objects himself, without which it is already impossible to imagine the metropolis stretching along the hillsides of Zailysky Alatau. On the 26th of October 1946, by decision of the Council of People's Commissars of Soviet Union, it was announced the establishment of the Academy of Services of the Kazakh Soviet Socialist Republic. At that moment, Kazakhstani branch had already numbered more than 700 employees, of which 78 were doctors of science, and 200 were candidates. Of course, the question came up about location of the newly established academy. According to personal instruction of Comrade Stalin, preparations are already underway for the construction of the main building of the Academy of Sciences of the Kazakh Soviet Socialist Republic, which will be a monumental building in the capital of Kazakhstan, in the city of Alma-Ata. Construction of the main building of the academy will be completed in the fourth five-year period. Design of Academy of Services' future building was taken to one of the most famous architects of that time, a man with a world name, Alexei Shuchesev. He was the author of the Lenin Mausoleum. The Moscow master did not immediately agree to take up this project. However, Kanish Satpayev insisted that it was Shushev who should become the architect of such a monumental building. He flew to Moscow himself, made an appointment, and convinced him. Academician Shushev said that he could not refuse such a Kazakh. He was handsome, smart, and intelligent person who made the science of Kazakhstan. He had to go. He went, and then our building had appeared. However, Shushev did not have time to complete his main Almaty pet project. It was completed only in 1957. Shushev died in 1949. The building of Academy was located in the square of Shevchenko, Pushkin, and Karl Marx streets, the present Kunaev. Big garden was set up between two wings of P-shaped building overlooking Kurmangazi. However, Shushev foresaw that the structure could be completed. Moreover, particularly here was decided to erect a future house of scientists.
Продолжить вот этот весь квартал, эту группу, да, конечно, надо было бы на уровне, но уж явно не сильно уступающим тому, что сделал Щусев. Это раз, но потом это общественность.
At first, it was necessary to continue the whole quarter in this group at the level which would not clearly disgrace the works made by Shushev. And then it was a public building, which itself was not only the face of our science, but also the face of our state. When we designed and built it, it was supervised by the Academy of Sciences president of the day, Askar Akhmetovich Kunaev, Dimash Akhmetovich's brother, and this was a plus for us. Always, when such important objects are being built for the city, an official competition is going on in order not to lower the bar and to make it at the level.
Когда сооружаются какие-то знаковые для города объекты, идет, негласное соревнование, чтобы, так сказать, не уронить планку, да, сделать его на уровне.
Although behind the backs of the House of Scientists founders, there was a very influential person in the Republic, they still lost competition. The fact is that in the same years, there was the construction of another cult building in Alma-Ata, Arasan Baths. Moreover, since this object had a more massive and less elite purpose, the city leaders preferred it. As a result, the main cash flow and the best building materials were spent there.
Я бы так сказал, в социальном плане Дом ученых это все-таки не, хоть и общественное здание, но не
I would say that in social plan, the House of Scientists is a public building, but it is not for the wider population. But Arasan Baths is a city-wide building. It is luxurious. For the first time in Kazakhstan, it is a constructed building that anyone can visit. Therefore, it was believed that Arasan Baths, in its importance, prestige, and social significance, is #1 object, and our object was #2. And thus the best finishing materials went to that object. Moreover, in those days, they were very rigidly regulated and released for some kind of regulations.
А в те времена Советского Союза, они очень жестко и очень строго регламентировались и отпускались по каким-то там нормативам.
That is why Ordabayev failed to implement his project of the building of the House of Scientists by 100%. The building was built in record time. Building the facade, designers simply repeated the ideas of Alexei Shushev. but working on interiors, they gave vent to their imagination. Some mosaic images of the most famous natives of Kazakh steppe appeared in the building's hall, paved using technology of ancient masters.
Небольшой процент.
A small percentage of these stones are natural stones, but basically it is so-called smalt, that is colored opaque glass, which was prepared at the enterprises of the Union of Artists Fund of the USSR. There were very few similar enterprises in the USSR.
Таких предприятий в СССР было немного.
And yet, due to the mentioned competition with founders of Arasan Bast, the surfacing material was not always enough. For example, the vaulted doorway of the House of Scientists had to be decorated by Kazakh ornaments, and the floor in the foyer was originally supposed to be laid out in a more sophisticated technique. This is a Turkic ancient Sufi motif, a square entering a square that forms 4 directions of light and is even more complicated. This is an ancient symbol. We see such ornaments in the mausoleum of Aisha Bibi and in a number of our medieval historical monuments. Since the new part of the Academy complex was originally planned rather not as a temple of science but as a place for leisure, they provided a room for recreation. This place was the interior garden. Its main decoration was a mosaic wall illustrating the history of the Kazakh people. It is collected from semi-precious stones, specially brought from the Baltics. Vegetation was delivered from the botanical garden of the Academy of Sciences. In the interior garden, the scientists had rest. They could have coffee, tea, smoke, and have a rest at loose hours. Another important room of the building was a large hall where scientists could conduct their conferences. Here, Almas Ordabayev's team recreated the project of a medieval city where the stage was the main square, and the booths with windows installed in the second tier simulated the houses adjacent to it. A huge portrait of the revolution leader adorned the wall behind the scene. It is another complex mosaic image that is tightly clipped now due to the change of ideologies. While I am not very positive about Lenin, the descendants will understand it. Nevertheless, if you distract that it was done, the work was very good. It was professional and high-quality work. Moreover, indeed, I say this is the only type of such mosaic in Kazakhstan. It is very complicated and expensive, but they met such expenses. The aspiration of Almas Ordabayev to follow traditions of medieval East is not accidental. The first building that pushed him to study the history of architecture was the famous mausoleum of Khoja Ahmed Yasawi in Turkestan. And it happened that Ordabayev actually saved this monument of Eastern architecture from complete destruction. It was he who first paid attention to the fact that because of Aris Turkestan canal construction under the city, the groundwater accumulates, which washes away the raw structures. Ordabayev, who was invited to restore Majolika cladding, assessing the situation immediately, wrote a letter to the Republic leaders, warning that if the issue was not resolved in the shortest time, the restored tile would simply not be glued on. Kunayev had achieved money distribution from the federal budget for the mausoleum recovery.
This is just one of his most important actions, which he forced the resolution of Central Committee and Council of Ministers, using all his diplomatic talent and certainly friendly relations with Leonid Ilyich Brezhnev. To tell the truth, it was a resolution of Kazakh SSR, not the USSR, whereby we could quite easily allocate fair enough amounts of money. And then a large drainage work was carried out to pump out these groundwaters.
Immediately after the end of the mausoleum restoration in Turkestan, Ordabayev was called to Alma-Ata again, where a new grand construction began. By the end of the 70s, the population of Kazakhstan's capital of the day had grown noticeably, and during public festivities and demonstrations, the old square could no longer accommodate all comers. Then it was decided to build a new square.
Если посмотреть на некоторые сохранившиеся фотографии, аэрофотографии Алматы,
If you look at some of the extant aerial photographs of Alma-Ata of the 40s, 50s, and early 60s, it can be seen that the city abruptly ended on the Abay Avenue. Then it was called as the head irrigation ditch. Moreover, there were fields above, experimental fields of the Zoological Veterinary, experimental fields of Agricultural Institute, and some private, unauthorized buildings, as they say, Nachalovka. That is, in short, there was no more or less developed urban infrastructure here. This was a private, not very high-quality construction of dilapidated houses. Therefore, there was not much demolition during construction of this square and the building of the Central Committee of Kazakhstan's Communist Party.
Здание ЦК КПК Казахстана, ныне Акимат, большого сноса, в общем-то, и не было.
Initially, the square itself provided for two large administrative buildings. The architects called them hockey sticks thanks to their form. They converged to two residential high-rise buildings. Only then the ideas come up to remove the administrative center of the Republic right here. However, before the project was implemented, the authors had to make a trick.
Дело в том, что в СССР существовало такое правило, что любой объект, который сооружался...
The fact is that there was such a rule in the USSR that any object that was being built in the Union at the cost of more than 5 million rubles had to be approved in Moscow. What was this going to lead to? It delayed time at first, and in order to avoid this intrusive control of financial inspectors and other bodies, there was such a practice in Alma-Ata. Any large object was broken into several objects, so that each part of it was not more than 5 million rubles. Therefore, improvement was not part of the project here, as if it had nothing to do with it.
Объект разбивался на несколько объектов, так, чтобы каждая его часть была не дороже 5 миллионов. Поэтому вот здесь вот благоустройство, проект благоустройства, он не входил в проект здания ЦК. Это был отдельный проект, как будто вообще не имеет к нему отношения.
According to the project, Almaty is a city for pedestrians, a part of the square with Baisitova Street adjacent to it in a state of restoration. This is one of the projects of Danish architect Jan Gehl in Almaty. Very soon the territory will be spread out before residents and visitors of the city in a completely new appearance, but importantly, the square itself will not be changed.
Здесь будет
Here will be installed small architectural forms for quiet rest of residents, playgrounds, sculptures, decorative fountains. Dry trees will be removed and new bushes and trees will be planted.
деревья, высажены новые различные кустарники и деревья.
Almas Ordabayev spent his childhood in an old hut, and once he established and desired to become an architect, he set the goal of doing something to make his contemporaries live in more comfortable conditions. He had such a chance. Now this group of buildings would be called as elite residential complex. In Soviet times, of course, no one operated with such terms, but a new abbreviation for Almaty people appeared. It was OZHPR, which has become the object of many ridicule on the part of the residents themselves. An experimental residential district was to be stretched between Furmanova and Lenin streets. It was believed that people should live in such homes in the era of developed socialism. There were small petrodollars in the country, and it was assumed that such a development could become a mass phenomenon. But the situation had changed on foreign markets, and for many years, Samol micro-district will inevitably become the most elite place of the residents in the Republic. Speaking on the scale of the Soviet Union, and especially in conditions of seismic activity, there were the first full-fledged monolithic residential buildings in Almaty and in Kazakhstan, which have a remarkable structural strength and many advantages of monolithic housing construction. Monolithic houses in Alma-Ata were built before, but they were erected in so-called sliding formwork, or as architects say, following elevator technology. This is when the basic construction is erected first without overlapping, which are attached later. But such a method is unreliable, and then engineers came up with another way of dividing the house into floors with powerful joints overlapping. These houses are able to withstand the most severe earthquakes, and as the builders themselves jokingly assured themselves, in case of even the most terrible disaster, they will not collapse, but maximum will fall to the side.
My name is Carmela, I'm from Italy. I'm here because my husband is working here. And we've been living in Almaty for a year with my 2 kids. We live here in Joly next to Dostik Plaza. Overall, we like it. It's a safe place, very European looking.
My name's Ashley Clark, I'm from the UK. I work here as an accountant and I very much enjoy living in Almaty.
Almas Ordabayev had many private and public projects, including outside Kazakhstan, but he presented his main creations to Almaty residents. Preparing to step over the 70s, he still continues working actively. He designs not only new architectural structures, but also continues to do painting, which was taken away in school years. This is one of his main works as an artist. He began to write this picture depicting the panorama of medieval Khiva almost 50 years ago, carefully elaborating details, and he is still in no hurry to finish it.
Я в этом городе бывал много-много раз. Возил туда своих студентов.
I've been to this city many times. I drove my students there for introductory training. In general, it gives us a lot of materials about the origins of not only Central Asian, but also of our Kazakh architecture. And that's why, of course, interest in the city was reflected in such a picture, which is allegedly drawn from some non-existent but very high minaret. And the idea to build the largest minaret in the Islamic world was really born in Khiva. And now I estimated if it had really been built and if I looked at my favorite piece of Khiva from this point, I could see such a thing.
И вот я просчитал, если бы его действительно достроили, вот с этой точки посмотреть на любимый кусочек моей Хивы, вот я бы мог увидеть такую вещь.
Besides, Almas Ordabayev is a teacher with more than half a century experience. For the years of his teaching activity, he managed to grow a whole galaxy of talented architects and designers who remember his teachings and advice even after many years.
Я, когда поступил в институт, я впервые познакомился с Алмаз Баймухановичем, и сразу же When
I entered the institute, I met Almas Baymukhanovich for the first time. Moreover, it was clear immediately that this man is an encyclopedist. We can say that he is a library, he is an archive, something like a design institute. He also has other traits. For example, he can passionately and impressively criticize, in particular me. Moreover, I gave up on. Perhaps he is the same now, I do not know, but it helped me.
Что у меня опускались руки вообще. Возможно, он сейчас такой, я этого не знаю. Но это мне помогло.
Now, like 50 years ago, you can find him again with chalk in the hands near the board. Tomorrow, these students will continue their work and will build Kazakhstan of the future. And today, their main goal is to get as much knowledge as possible from the master of domestic architecture. Well, I would say that he is original, but he explains it very interestingly. This is a teacher with his own character. He is demanding. This is the person who will make you turn inside out, if mildly speaking, but then you will be satisfied with your result. This is a completely unique person. This is an absolutely talented architect. In addition, he has a lot of knowledge in various fields and he knows how to apply them in practice. And now, when he works at the institute, he can transfer them to those students who come to his classes. This may look like nonsense, but a man who showed Almaty residents what the comfort of living in monolithic high-rise is, and who carried out private orders for construction of houses in London and Paris, lives in an inconspicuous 4-story Khrushchevka building. Almas Ordabayev turned his small apartment into a cozy mini-studio, whose interior design, of course, he did by himself. Here everything lies in its place, and each of them has its own decoration. He is a happy husband, father, and grandfather. Moreover, he is still full of energy. Like any creative person, he still has many unrealized projects.